Welcome to Walking the Torah Portions. I'm Tyler Merwin, and this is Torah Portion, AZINU. This week's Torah portion is Deuteronomy chapter 32, verses 1 through 52. The Haftarah this week is 2 Samuel 22, verses 1 through 51. AZINU means give ear. And in our opening line it says, "Give ear, O heavens, and I will speak, and let the earth hear the words of my mouth." Deuteronomy 32, verse 1. This week we continue with Moses' final instructions given to Israel. This was given on the day of his death, coinciding with his 120th birthday. Let's begin by highlighting how we got here. In last week's portion, after Moses had given his final encouragement to the people, and had also commissioned and encouraged Joshua as the new leader, God tells Moses that Israel will backslide and start mixing idolatry with worship to the Holy One, breaking the covenant that he made with them. He continues to tell them that because of this, God will hide his face from them, which would be to remove his protection, and many calamities and evils will befall the people. So as a final commandment to Moses, God instructs him to write down a shirah, or a song, and teach it to the people. The shirah that's given is the Song of Moses. This shirah will be the key God gives his people to look to when they find themselves in desolation, absent from God's presence, wondering, how did we get here? And will God deliver us from our predicament? Moses invokes heaven and earth to be the witnesses against Israel when they break their covenant with God. "Assemble to me all the elders of your tribes and your officers, that I may speak these words in their ears and call heaven and earth to witness against them." Deuteronomy 31, verse 28. In legal cases of serious nature, there must be 2 or 3 witnesses before the court would issue a punishment. So here, heaven and earth are those 2 witnesses. Witnesses that will still be around in the future when Israel will backslide. Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh himself will also be that 3rd witness. It was also normally required that the witnesses would take the lead in administering the appropriate punishment. So too, when the punishment of Israel does come about, much of those punishments' source will be directly attributed to the heavens and to the earth. This is why the sages say that the heavens would withhold its rain, and the earth would withhold its produce. So the opening line of our shirah called upon the heavens and the earth to hear this song. The text in the Torah scroll even illustrates this. The text is separated to the right and the left sides of the page, standing, as it were, as the 2 witnesses, the heavens and the earth. The text is configured this way through the whole Song of Moses. I think these 2 columns of text can also be seen as guardrails to keep us on the straight and narrow path, if we heed its warnings. "May my teaching drop as the rain, my speech distill as the dew, like gentle rain upon the tender grass, and like showers upon the herb." Deuteronomy 32:2. The sages note that rain comes down to us from a heavenly source, and we receive it here on earth, to absorb it and to carry it out in the physical. It's described as both rain and dew. Some of us are newer in our walk and are more tender plants. Too much rain would not be beneficial, but that morning dew is exactly what we need to thrive and survive. But some of us are more mature plants, and that dew is just wets our whistle. But what we need is a good rain to really drink in the nourishment of the Word. "For I will proclaim the name of Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh, ascribe greatness to our God. The rock, his work is perfect, for all his ways are justice. A God of faithfulness and without iniquity, just and upright is he." Deuteronomy 32, 3 and 4. This is why we should always have hope in all of our circumstances. Our rock is perfect, faithful, just, and upright. He will always do what he has promised, and will always uphold his part of the covenant, and sometimes even our end as well. because of his great love and mercy. They have dealt corruptly with him. They are no longer his children, because they are blemished. They are a crooked and twisted generation. Do you thus repay Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh, you foolish and senseless people? Is not he your father who created you, who made you and established you? Deuteronomy 32, 5 and 6. The blemish, or the problem, is not with God our rock. It is with his people, whom even in disobedience he still lovingly calls his children. Moses asked how they could break Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh's covenant after all that he had done for them. Remember the days of old. Consider the years of many generations. Ask your father, and he will show you. Your elders, and they will tell you. Deuteronomy 32, 7. The sages see this song as being divided into 5 sequential historical themes. First, that God created the world and all the nations to achieve his goal. When that failed, or when they failed, God chose Israel for this mission. God gave Israel a land where they could serve him in joy and prosperity, but they ungratefully rebelled. Because of this, they deserved to be destroyed. But because of his great name and his mercy, he only exiled them instead. And at the end of days, they will be redeemed. And Moses describes the redemption and how the enemies of Israel will be punished. When the Most High gave to the nations their inheritance, when he divided mankind, he fixed the borders of the peoples according to the number of the sons of God. Deuteronomy 32, 8. When God divided mankind is referring to the Tower of Babel in Genesis 11. In that account, the Torah says that God confused the people's language and dispersed them over the face of all the earth. The term sons of God here in the ESV can more literally be translated sons of Israel, because the Hebrew word here is actually Yisrael, not Elohim. But obedient Israel is effectually sons of God. So sons of Israel and sons of God can be equivalent expressions. So according to the number of the sons of God, or Israel, is understood to be the whole family of Israel that went down into Egypt when Joseph was in command. According to Genesis 46:27, this was 70 people. So the text is telling us that when the people were dispersed at the Tower of Babel, they were divided into 70 groups, or 70 languages. So this verse is where we get the idea that there are symbolically 70 nations of the whole earth. But Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh's portion is his people, Jacob his allotted heritage. Deuteronomy 32, verse 9. Here we go from focusing on mankind to choosing Israel. Verses 10 through 14 describe God lovingly caring for and guiding Israel and bringing them into a land flowing with milk and honey. Finding him in the desert is the 40-year wilderness journey. Encircling him is referring to the protective clouds of glory that surrounded Israel's encampment in the wilderness. Verse 12 states, Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh alone guided him. No foreign god was with him. This refers to the concept that we discussed before, that other nations of the earth have angels that are designated and assigned to protect those nations' interests, as we find in the book of Daniel. But for Israel, the creator of the universe himself would personally oversee his people. Verse 13 and 14 speak of the bounty and fruitfulness of the land. But Yeshurun grew fat and kicked. You grew fat, stout and sleek. Then he forsook God who made him and scoffed at the rock of his salvation. Deuteronomy 32:15. This is the first time in Scripture where Israel is referred to by the title Yeshurun. This comes from the Hebrew root word yashar, meaning upright, straight, or just. So this is an endearing term for someone who does not deviate from the high standards of the Holy One. But too much prosperity led to Israel rebelling against the God who gave them the prosperity in the first place. Good fortune and prosperity is a serious test that have brought down many nations and many people. When we have everything, our nature is to desire what we were not designed for, the things we shouldn't have. Like in the garden, when they could eat from every tree in the garden, except for one, they desired what they weren't designed for, the forbidden fruit. Verse 16 through 18 tells of Israel's decline into idolatry. Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh saw it and spurned them because of the provocation of his sons and his daughters. And he said, I will hide my face from them. I will see what their end will be, for they are a perverse generation, children in whom is no faithfulness. Deuteronomy 32, 19 and 20. Because of Israel's unrepentant sin, God hides his face and judgment will come down on Israel. Verses 21 through 25 continue the theme of God's punishment of his people. I would have said, I will cut them to pieces. I will wipe them from human memory, had I not feared provocation by the enemy, lest their adversaries should misunderstand, lest they should say, our hand is triumphant. It was not Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh who did this. Deuteronomy 32, 26 and 27. After the litany of judgments and punishments, God pauses and relents, because the nations he used to punish Israel will be haughty and think it was their own might that did this, and not the fact that God was actually using them as a rod of correction. I will cut them to pieces will be better translated, I will scatter them to the corners. This would be an accurate prophecy of the northern 10 tribes being scattered to the four corners of the earth. Because of Israel is God's people, their complete destruction, though deserved, would desecrate the name of Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh. God will relent and now focus his attention on the foolish nations that believed that their success was over Israel was due to their own strength and the power of their own gods. Verse 28 through 35 speaks of the enemy's conceit. If the enemy was partially wise, they should have been able to discern that their perceived victories were actually supernatural. Vengeance is mine, and recompense, for the time when their foot shall slip, for the day of their calamity is at hand, and their doom comes swiftly. Deuteronomy 32, verse 35. The enemy always gets cocky when he thinks he has won. Then, like a flood, Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh will lift up a standard against him. For Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh will vindicate his people and have compassion on his servants when he sees that their power is gone and that there is none remaining, bond or free. Deuteronomy 32, 36. For God's name's sake, he will redeem his people. A famous preacher once said, God works best at the zero factor. We see here that God comes to vindicate his people when they have no power. They are at the zero factor. This is so we don't attribute our deliverance to our own strength. It is God and God alone who can save. When we are at our end sometimes, God doesn't want our help. He simply wants our obedience. The sages believe that the Jews will need to be at the zero factor for the Messiah to come. Then he will say, where are their gods, the rock in which they took refuge, who ate the fat of their sacrifices and drank the wine of their drink offering? Deuteronomy 32, 37, and 38. Here God asks Israel to recognize how they got here. They left God and put their trust in other gods, ideologies, religious systems, political systems, financial systems, all that cannot save. See now that I, even I, am he, and there is no God beside me. I kill, and I make alive. I wound, and I heal. And there is none that can deliver out of my hand. Deuteronomy 32, 39. Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh is the only God, the only one that we can trust in. For I lift up my hand to heaven and swear, as I live forever, if I sharpen my flashing sword and my hand takes hold on judgment, I will take vengeance on my adversaries and will repay those who hate me. Deuteronomy 32, 40 and 41. God takes an oath on himself that he will turn his anger on those who persecute Israel, because to attack God's people is to attack God. David understood this concept as he refused to lift his hand against King Saul, God's anointed, though Saul was persecuting David. Rejoice, O nations, with his people, for he will avenge the blood of his servants, and will render vengeance on his adversaries, and will atone for his land and his people. Deuteronomy 32, verse 43. Here I use the NASB translation, which was a little more literal to the Hebrew Masoretic text. This is seen as the end of days redemption, when the whole world will see God redeem Israel and punish her enemies, and make atonement for Israel, both the people and the land. This concludes the Song of Moses, a song that will carry way into the future. And I saw what appeared to be a sea of glass mingled with fire, and also those who had conquered the beast and its image and the number of its name, standing beside the sea of glass with harps of God in their hands. And they sing the song of Moses, the servant of God, and the song of the Lamb. Revelation 15, verses 2 and 3. This is a Shira that is still being sung in the book of Revelation. Moses recites all of the song to the people along with Joshua. He said to them, "Take to heart all the words by which I am warning you today, that you may command them to your children, that they may be careful to do all the words of this law. For it is no empty word for you, but it is your very life. And by this word you shall live long in the land that you are going over the Jordan to possess." Deuteronomy 32, 46 and 47. Moses is then given his final commandment from God. That very day, Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh spoke to Moses, "Go up this mountain of the Abarim, Mount Nebo, which is in the land of Moab, opposite Jericho, and view the land of Canaan, which I am giving to the people of Israel for possessions, and die on the mountain which you go up, and be gathered to your people, as Aaron your brother died in Mount Hor, and was gathered to his people." Deuteronomy 32, 48 and 50. Moses is then reminded why he was not allowed to enter the promised land, because of the incident at Meribah Kadesh. And our portion ends with, "For you shall see the land before you, but you shall not go there, into the land that I am giving to the people of Israel." Deuteronomy 32, verse 52. Let us take heed of this song so that we don't forsake the rock of our salvation. Heaven and earth are bearing witness to our actions. Let us imitate Yeshua, the one who is truly Yeshurun. I pray this teaching has been edifying. Let's lift up the name of the Holy One with love and echad. Shalom.